Let's say Trump gets reelected. Do you think there's big risk in the momentum we have here? I think, like we were talking about earlier, you need policy, you need dollars from government, but also back to this void, you see venture, right? This really interesting chart where you go back, you look in the last 10 years, like, there was about, 1.9 billion in 2012 invested in some kind of climate tech. To last year was 40 billion. And so it's great because if you want to really accelerate, I mean, I agree with you 100%. Are we doing things? Yes. Do we need to go way faster? For sure. But I think you need, capital is fuel. And if you can get more talented minds and moving, you will push faster and accelerate those things. So, I am generally an optimist, like I said, I think, but you need everyone engaging in the conversation. And one of the reasons I even started doing interviews like this, because I felt like most people in general were frustrated and they feel like, this is such a hard problem. Like, how do I dissect this thing and talk about it? And you're reading online. I'm like, I need a PhD to decipher what the heck I'm reading here.
That's true. But, the good news is that there's a lot of people who are getting PhDs right now because of this problem and to solve this problem. So that's really helpful. The other thing is, like, it's true the venture dollars have gone up and, venture is not known as builders. And ultimately we need builders. But the good thing is that there's also really creative capital approaches on the building side. I mean, I also have a great opportunity to spend some time with a firm called Generate Capital, which is like really created a platform for how you're able to invest in the transition from a project perspective and an infrastructure perspective. So like big money going to hard things with people who really know how to do it. And what the team there has done is just like they've created a new model. They've said exactly what we were saying earlier, which is like the last time we built an infrastructure, a global infrastructure, we did it based on a financial model that made sense for that. Let's figure out the financial model that makes sense for this. And they've created this idea of creating like infrastructure as a service where you're able to be a customer and still get the kind of green credentials you need, but without taking project risk and technology risk that you don't feel comfortable doing because that's not your job.
Yeah.
And it's like really trying to figure out some of those. So like, I mean, Breakthrough is certainly a creative application of venture capital. It doesn't look like traditional venture. It's a much longer, has much more patience. It's much more technology focused than a lot of venture is. And it has some brilliant minds at that early stage. And then you've got places like Generate that have some like brilliant minds at a project finance stage. And then you've got countries that are putting, billions. I mean, the just DOE, which is the Department of Energy, so just part of the infrastructure bill, there's $38 billion to help offset the cost of early stage first of a kind commercial technology applications and things like green hydrogen and direct air capture and cement and steel. Like that changes the game. I mean, that just changes the game. And like it's our job over the next couple of years to demonstrate that there's value in taking that big policy risk and taking those big risks in structures. But it's, again, I think that we're hopefully we're at the point where we're not rolling the boulder up the hill, we're rolling the snowball down the hill.
Yeah. And it's got a lot of momentum. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that hopefully that's where we
do you feel like let's fast forward this. Let's say, for example, I'm going extreme. Let's say Trump gets reelected. Do you think there's big risk in the momentum we have here?
Yeah, I mean, there was a ton of renewable technology deployment during Trump's first term. And a lot of it is because if you like a climate hawk, somebody who is, deeply committed to climate change and is someone who votes on that issue, tends to be someone who votes Democrat. If you look at where the vast majority of these large scale infrastructure developments are going to be, actually, I shouldn't say the vast majority. The funds that go out of these programs, the incentives that lead to actual community development and economic development are very spread out across the country. So if you look at like Texas has enormous amounts of wind and solar, just more than anybody else in the country. They've got community solar, they've got large scale solar,
lots of land too.
Wind, they've got a lot of wind, they've got a lot of natural resources for renewable energy. If you look at like where is it that we're going to build carbon management economy, it's going to be in the places that have drilled for things before, that have taken things out of the ground because they can put them back in.
Hmm.
So if you look at like North Dakota and Oklahoma and Wyoming, those are all places that are ready to be the leaders in a clean energy economy. And those communities may not care as much as communities in California and New York about whether they're the focus of the clean energy economy, but they sure as hell want to be a place where there is good economic outcomes.
Yeah.
There are places where they are retiring coal infrastructure, not because they care about climate necessarily, but because it's coming to an end. Like
Yeah.
the useful life of those assets are coming to an end, but they've got a workforce that's trained to do certain things, and it turns out that you can still do those things
Yeah.
in a new energy economy. So I think that so the reason why you didn't see a recession in clean energy deployment during Trump was because you have a wind corridor in Iowa, and you have very powerful senators in Iowa who are Republicans. And they're like, no way are you taking away the incentives to build more wind. Like, that is a lifeblood of our community.
Yeah.
And if you look at like where TerraPower is going to deploy its first of a kind commercial demonstration nuclear plant, it's Wyoming, and it's in a coal community in Wyoming. So I think it's easy to scapegoat these policy provisions at a federal level for the whole time until they start getting built. And then what you're going to start realizing is that
Yeah.
communities really
There's money
don't.
there.
Yeah, communities want, like, people in these communities want to be able to have good jobs where they can feed their family and that they can count on there being jobs for future generations. And these happen to be those things.
Yeah.
Like the idea that there are quote clean energy jobs. I mean, the truth is that the revolution for creating an alternative to what we use right now is every job. So like every job ultimately is going to be a clean energy job.
Hmm.
And so you have to look at like where are you going to be able to create the most jobs. If you look at the battery belt that's being developed, it's in the South. It's South Carolina, it's North Carolina. It's places that tend to vote Republican. I'm pretty sure. And South Carolina has some of the most like not progressive, like liberal, but like forward thinking policies to attract things like the new battery manufacturing, because it's not just about tax breaks for big companies who are going to come in and do that. I mean, sure, they do that too, but they're thinking about workforce development. Like they're
Yeah.
thinking about like how they create the intellectual capital to make sure that South Carolina gets to compete all the time
Yeah.
with everybody who wants to put a battery together. So
It just
um,
shifts. I think
it
that
just
the roles shift, and I think anytime there's disruption, people always worry what's happening with XYZ jobs, and the reality is whatever the new thing is or something else usually picks up on that. That's exactly what we're talking about here.
Exactly. Yeah. And oftentimes they're in states where they have political orientation that is not what you would think of as like the climate advocates. I mean, Georgia, for example, the Republican governor in Georgia has been courting EV manufacturing for his whole time in Georgia. And he's had to push back against some of the like super right wing members of his own party, but he's done it because there's going to be a Rivian plant outside of Atlanta now. I think that the economics of this stuff is gonna, it needed the push down the hill from these federal bills, but the impacts are felt in communities,
Do you
and those people are going to feel good about it.